Hello, this is Claire.
And I'm Crispy, and we're here to tell you that we'll be tabling at TCAF.
Phantom Marine Volume 1 will be available.
And Ghost Junk Sickness books 1 to 4, as well as the Chapter 1 sampler of our new comic, Lunar Blight, will be there.
We'll also have some Screen Tones goodies to check out, so come say hi at TCAF, table 2082 and 2080 on the second floor.
See you there!
Just do it! Don't let your dreams be dreams. Yesterday said tomorrow. So just do it! Make your dreams untrue!
Hello and welcome to Screen Tones, where we talk everything and anything webcomics. I'm Finn, my pronouns are they, them, and I create the webcomic Heirs of the Veil.
I'm Megan, pronouns are she, her, and I create the webcomic Sorcery Shenanigans.
I'm Jacki. I use they or she pronouns, and I make the webcomic Kings of Swords.
Okay, so unless you're writing a webcomic that doesn't feature any humanoid beings at all, you will probably have to figure out clothing and fashion style for your characters. How you approach that topic, however, can depend on a lot of factors, like what's the setting of your story, what is the cultures you're trying to portray, what are the personalities of your character, and of course, how willing you are and how much time you have to put in these details into these clothing styles. So today we're going to talk about the ins and outs of fashion in webcomics, our own approach, and general ideas and pitfalls. So our first question would be, what inspires you to create fashion and the kinds of fashion you create in your works?
I get my inspirations from a variety of places, like most people do, anything I'm looking at. But it's important to be responsible when you are getting inspiration from your inspirations, because you're probably going to be taking inspiration from various current media, and it's important to be aware that what they're showing you is viewed through their own lens, if that makes sense. Like, anything that you're seeing, it has someone else's opinions and biases in it. So, for example, when they show you like desert culture, what they're showing you is what they think of it. And usually it's not super accurate, at all. So just being aware that, where those sort of tropes come from, specific example being the, the belly dancer look trope, which is used in so many different types of fantasy media. It's everywhere. And I mention it specifically because I've seen it brought up so many times, and I've seen people be so frustrated by it. It's not an accurate portrayal of how they dress or act. So, and it may seem like it's just clothes, and if you're in a fantasy setting like I work in, it's just fantasy. It doesn't have to be based in reality. But the issue comes in when that's what people think of when they think of these cultures. They think of what they've seen in popular media, not actual, the actual clothing and customs. The actual clothing from the Middle Eastern, North Africa area, which is usually what the whole belly dancer look gets it overshadows them. They're so varied and interesting and practical, which is always fun. And even putting them in one category is an oversimplification. So the fact that we are like drowning out the whole culture and then way oversimplifying it, it's like we're doing ourselves a disservice. So, all that to say, it's important to keep in mind where the tropes you see come from and the adverse effects they can have. If you're like, I know people will get worried about, like, well, I don't know every single trope. Like, what if I make a mistake? What if I make an offensive outfit? And, like, you probably will make mistakes. We all do. I've made plenty of clothing that is now very cringeworthy. But the best thing to do to learn is to start looking, especially if you're like making fashion for webcomics and stuff, is to look from artists from around the world so you can see like their cultures through their eyes, which gives you a much more honest view of what it actually looks like. And like seeing people's cultures through their own eyes, it's really great because they're such loving portrayals instead of like how in popular media it can be so like exoticized or whatever or fetishized. But when you're looking at the actual people related to the culture, like it's just so lovely to see because they love their culture, obviously. I will stop rambling about that. I do have a few artists who I have seen talk about like the issue of like getting their cultures wrong, specifically the belly dancer thing. I'm pretty sure I've seen all these artists talk about it. They're on Twitter. It's Sinlaith, who is right now holding a space on Twitter to discuss West Asian world building. Samosai, who is North African and works a lot with North African mythologies. I believe they have a webcomic as well. So, wow, that fits in. Safise is Kabyle Algerian, and they have been putting out these like sets of character designs based on their culture, which just they're all so unique and they have the most amazing shapes. So like, yeah, all that to say, get it from a responsible source. Source your fashion responsibly.
No, it's all good. I think that's like a really important point to make because especially when designing in fantasy settings, people really don't think about the sources, like you've said, that they're using. They're basically just like reworking things that they have said, they have seen in popular media,
Mm-hmm.
and sometimes we have to deal with the fact that like there's, for example, with the belly dancer, there's a lot of like orientalism going on in the media. So I think that's an important point to like make.
But for me personally, for my inspirations, like I said before, I try to get inspiration from anywhere I can because it's good to get a variety. I set up a personal Discord to store interesting outfits and references. There's lots of fashion blogs on Tumblr. Few of my go-tos are Fashion Runways, Daisy Fashion, Hanfu Gallery, and Tokyo Fashion. And there's also plenty of like historical fashions there to look from. One I follow is Fashion from History. Other places you can look is like for patterns, architecture is really great to look at, like ceiling tiles and floor tiles. It gives you some really neat patterns to work with. Then I have art books from classical artists, which you can probably get at your local library, so check that out. I have a, a book called Patterns in Art. Like, I like to focus on patterns a lot, which is why I mentioned the architecture. And this book, like, simplifies patterns from classical art, which you could do yourself. And so, looking at that, one of my favorites is my set of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure art books, like, especially as the series has gone on, the fashions have gotten quite interesting. And so, even though they're not always realistic, it's a really good source of unique inspiration. And then, like, following models on social media, like more indie models, I guess you would say. Like, Wisdom K is one of my favorites on Twitter. He, like, might have seen videos of, like, this kids show, but what if they were fashionable? And so he pulls out some really neat looks, and a lot of them kind of lean in a sci-fi direction, which is great in my opinion, because since it's actual clothing, it can give you ideas on how those types of clothes would work practically. If you want to design clothes practically, it's very, very useful to just observe people around you, including yourself. Like, pay attention to people, what they're wearing, how the clothes fit on them, looking at different realistic body types and how they dress themselves, like, especially with, like, with larger people, because uh, a lot of people have trouble drawing, like, fat people realistically and then dressing them realistically. So, like, actually looking and seeing how they dress themselves is, like, the best source you could ever get. And just, like, there's so much beauty and, like, variation of body types IRL. So yeah, it's just people watch for a while. It's great to look at. Watch the Great British Bake Off. People on there are so normal. They look so normal and varied. I love it. What helps me is that, like, when you're looking at all these different inspirations, like, pick out specific pieces that you like. Like, oh, I like the cut of these pants or the shape of that shoe. So then you can take that and use that later in your own designs. And it won't just be like, I like this whole outfit, so now I'm copying it. Like, you can more create your own like that.
Yeah, Megan, what about you? What inspires you?
I think, uh, personally, like Jackie was saying, pulling from multiple sources is really important so that you can create more of an original design by taking pieces from different areas. In Sorcery Shenanigans, I have specific sort of real life fashion I pull from for different characters. Um, I pulled from traditional Hanfu for Alec, and then also just sort of pulled from sort of any media that had sort of clerics or healers in it, and kind of mashed the two together. Um, I think Clarissa I pulled from Lolita, probably more specifically one of the subcultures, but I don't remember off the top of my head which one for her outfits. Um, and then I just pulled from any sort of media that had kind of characters that made potions, um, the kind of stereotypical big witch hats, of course, is a obvious and huge factor in her design. I definitely agree with what Jackie was saying about sort of being responsible in pulling from your fashion. And so that's why I pull from real photos of, like, Hanfu or Lolita subculture, so that I don't uh, pull, I'm less likely to pull the sort of stereotypes from those fashions, perhaps, when people are designing their own. And then also because the patterns, especially in Hanfu, is amazing. And so I really like looking at the different kind of patterns they have and using multiples to kind of pull together somewhat of my own. Aside from real fashion, I think I also pull from sort of the comics I read, just kind of seeing who has really good fashion designs that I really like, what bits I'm kind of inspired to pull into my own looks, and then kind of how to put those maybe with the overall look I'm already envisioning in my head.
Yeah. Um I totally agree, especially with the part about like being responsible, looking at actual people to get your inspirations from. Even though I think I often like break with that because I like I personally like Art Nouveau as like an art style, and I look at like a lot of paintings that kind of inspire me for like dresses, mostly for illustrations. But when it comes to like my inspirations for the webcomic, I because the story is like contemporary, I try to look at like modern street fashions depending on where the character is coming from or like what their usual style is, and I try to like find a feeling I associate with the character, and then like something I want the character to like feel like when I, for example, take Cortez. I kind of want him to feel like kind of like round and fluffy, so I try to find like clothes that fit that, and that's basically then the inspiration that I get. But I don't think I generally have like a lot to add because there's like such a big well of inspirations that we can take. I also agree with like looking at other comics because when you look at webcomics, there's like so many varied interpretations of how to use fashion in those comics, and it's cool to see how other people approach that, and sometimes you can really like find an approach that you like and that you then will use yourself. uh, but I think that already brings us to our second question, and that would be how do you get started designing a look? And what questions are you asking yourself when you get started?
For me, I like to work from a practical standpoint, like thinking about what are the outfits going to be used for? How are the characters going to wear them? So the first question I like to ask myself is, what is it going to be used for? Which gives you a bit of a framework for if the outfit will have certain requirements. Like, it can depend on what character is using it. Like, if they're an archer, I have an archer in my comic, and if they're prepared to do archery, the clothing is going to need archery gloves, which are very fashionable, so it works out great. If your character is in a wheelchair, you're going to want to think about how clothes are layered and how it might feel to sit on them for long periods of time. And the fun tip that I learned about designing long skirts for wheelchairs, the front should actually be longer than the back, so when you're sitting down, it falls evenly. And like a little bit back to the inspiration thing, like there are so many articles written by like wheelchair users and other disabled peoples about what's comfortable and what they want in clothes. So if you when you're looking at what will the clothing be used for, that can very be helpful. But if you're just designing for fun and you are stuck, it helps me to just think of a situation that they might be in, that they would be using this outfit for. And usually for me, that's fancy party, which is always a great way to go. From there, I think about 6 different things, not every time, but in general, these are the things I consider. Like the weight of the clothes, how heavy can the clothes be, which takes into account like layers and the fabrics you're going to use. Like if you're going to a fancy party, for example, and you want to be intimidating, you're going to want those layers and you'll want stiff, heavy layers so you look big and intimidating. And so your outfit doesn't move because you're an immovable force to be reckoned with in your fancy outfit. And that's what I think about. And if you want to be like a little sexy, you'll probably want lighter fabrics or tighter, stiffer clothing if you want to like force your body to look a certain way, which then leads into the second thing I think about, which is comfort. How do the clothes feel to wear? How does your character want to feel wearing clothes? Which can go over number of layers, how the clothing's fit, and fabrics used. Like going back to the wheelchair user example, what's going to be comfortable for them if comfort is what they're looking for? And for any character, do they like loose clothing? Do they like having something structured and stiff? Are there parts of their body they would rather hide or accentuate? Like, for example, one of my characters, Bon, I put him in crop tops all the time because I like to draw his scars. So I want to accentuate them. Next thing I think about is the complexity of the outfit. And this is like how elaborate or detailed it can be. If I'm designing for fun, I want to go all out. If I'm designing for practicality, I don't want to. Like if I'm, say, designing for a webcomic, I want it to be relatively simple because I'm going to be drawing it a million times. So if I don't want to kill my wrist, I'm going to need to put complexity in places where it makes sense. Like just little bits. Like within your webcomic world, is your character showy or they want to blend in more? That can be something that affects how complex the outfit should be. Next thing is functionality. Like what are they going to be doing in this outfit? Like, are they going to be walking? Are they going to be standing for long periods of time? And like for a few of my characters, like they're not stick thin. So if they're going to be active, then if there's not like cloth between the legs or between the armpits, like it's going to chafe. And I don't want that when I'm exercising. So I also don't want that for my characters. And it can seem like a silly little thing to think about, but if you're having trouble designing, it can help to give yourself all of these different rules to then work around. My next thing is silhouette. How do the clothes fit? And this is one thing besides complexity that can like make your character stand out, is giving them a unique silhouette. For me personally, I always go to like half loose, half tight outfits, tight top with baggy pants, or loose top with some leggings. It's good to wear, it's good to draw, but depending on your character's body types, it can be less obvious how to employ that. And like, I've mentioned weight as a factor multiple times here, and it's not a negative thing. It's just something to consider. And it can, when you take that into account, it can really expand the way you think about these things, because designing for different body types, like you have to take different things into account, and it will lead to very different designs for different body types. And that's very cool, in my opinion. But like for one of my characters, for a few of my characters, I have a very wide and short guy. So a lot of his silhouettes can end up looking basically the same, because like if you have a loose sweater on a skinny person, it's going to alter their silhouette. But on my guy, like more likely than not, it's just gonna follow the curves of his body. So if I want to change up the silhouette, I'll have to look for like generally stiffer materials that can hold a unique shape and that won't just like fit onto his body, and give him a little bit of a unique silhouette. But more often than not for him, I'll turn to like fun colors and patterns to make his outfits more unique, because like I could say that it's cool to make unique silhouettes, but I struggle with it. And it's a good struggle because I want him to have these fun outfits, and so I want to work harder at it. My next question I sometimes ask myself is practicality, like within the world, what is available for this character to wear? And obviously, it depends on the setting. Can they make polyester? Would your character have access to like silks or like fancy embroidered fabrics? And like going back to one of my characters, Bon, he generally wears like damaged or ill-fitting, like secondhand clothing because he there's he's not gonna get nice clothing any way, and two, he's likely to destroy it. So practically, there's no reason for him to be wearing nice clothes that are made specifically to fit him. So those are the 6 things I go over: weight, comfort, complexity, functionality, silhouette, and practicality. And like, I don't go over all of those every single time, but it's useful to think about, especially when you get stuck. Another thing that has been helpful to me and it guides my designs is like imagining in my head how the clothes feel. And so like recently I've been making a set of fancy outfits, and for one of my characters, I wanted her to look like a scholarly wizard. When she walks in a room, I want her to feel noticeable and important. So I gave her like a thick jacket with oversized shoulders, very intimidating, but she's not one to dress uncomfortably, so the rest of the outfit is quite loose. And so she ends up looking sort of pretty effortlessly intimidating. Nothing too showy or fitted, just a big, intimidating jacket. And then that contrasts with another character who has a bit of a sexier style. So I also wanted her to look intimidating, but it came about in a much different way. Like, I wanted it to be structured still, but hers is going to be like fit to her body. So it's showing off her curves, but still got to be intimidating. So while there's all that, the bottom of the dress is still very wide and the fabric is still pretty stiff. So it's like a keep away zone. So she's looking intimidating and also far from you. A weirdly specific thing I think about all the time for Hannah, my small wide guy, is where are his pants going to like hit on his tummy? Because from experience, it feels bad when your pants are in like a weird spot on your stomach. And so it's a little thing, but it's important when I'm like imagining in my head, how do these clothes feel? Like, if they're hitting him in the wrong spot and it's to be used for a practical purpose, that's not going to work very well. If it's for like a fancy occasion, possibly, because he's not going to have to do a lot in it. Yeah, just thinking about how it would feel for the character to move around, how it would feel to them to like stand, how it would feel for the people around them to be looking at them. That's what I think about when I'm designing a lot of things, but it's fun.
That's like a really detailed approach to designing fashion, and I think that's pretty cool.
It is a bit of a detailed approach, but like it's useful when you're starting out and you're like saying to yourself, I have no idea what to do. Like, even if you're designing a simple outfit, like maybe a lot of the questions will be, doesn't matter. How will the clothes fit? I don't really care. But just giving yourself some sort of like direction to work with can be useful. But it is pretty detailed. And like I said, I don't think about these things, all of them, directly every single time. But it's like in the back of your head when you consistently design outfits for a while. You start to just think about these things as you're creating.
I mean, it does sound detailed, but like if that's the way that works for you, then that's what works, you know? That's kind of the whole point, is just finding what works for you to design your looks, and how to get started with that. And maybe to some people, it's a little more detailed than what they would do. But if it works, who cares? Because I think I do agree with you on a few of the steps you use that I also use. And that would definitely be the sort of silhouette and practicality aspects. Definitely, especially in my case, because I have sort of 6 main characters, the silhouette is the most important part that I look at, purely because since I have 6 characters, everybody, if you were to just see a blacked out sort of image of them, has to look different so that you don't get anyone confused. And part of that is also because I work in color, everybody has to have a different main color, so that if you were to see sort of a fuzzy image of each character in color, there's less of a chance for you to get confused as to who's who. And like you were saying, the silhouette sort of direction that you go with is, for me, kind of dependent on the personality of the character. What kind of silhouette or feeling do they want to give off to people when they look at them? What sort of feeling do they want to feel when they wear their clothes? And then the practicality aspect is a little bit different for me. It does sort of go hand in hand with what are the clothes going to be used for, but also practically what would that character wear. Because my characters have one outfit the entirety of the comic, so nobody switches. So it has to show off their personality, but also what would they wear 24/7? What sort of clothes would be very comfortable to wear? Like I mentioned before, Clarissa deals in potions, so her clothes are kind of loose fitting but comfortable, but also not so loose fitting that perhaps they might get stuck in the potion itself. Just sort of those few things going on. And because, like I said, I deal I kind of the personality of the characters where I start designing my clothes. That's the most important part for me to have down before I even start thinking about the clothes. Kind of who they are as a person helps, for me at least, to shape what kind of clothes they wear.
Yeah, I think um, I personally go in a similar direction. I think about their personality and how it's supposed to reflect in the clothing they wear, and also what I've mentioned beforehand, how I kind of want the reader to feel when they look at the character. Like, I have certain feelings associated with the characters, and I kind of want to reflect that in how they dress. Um, so yeah, I want to reflect how the characters feel to me, and how I want to portray that to the reader. And things like how comfortable the clothing would be, or how practical the clothing would be, is also, of course, something that plays into it, because the characters run around a lot or walk places. um so I think that's something I think about too. Okay, so I think I have these 3 layers: how the characters feel to me, how I want them to feel to the reader, and how the characters see themselves. And that can be more or less important. If I think about someone like Victoria, for example, I think her clothing style is kind of not super coherent, because she kind of dresses in the things that she likes or that she wants. Sometimes it might be a little childish. Or when I think about Cortis, who doesn't really care that much about how he looks, he mostly just wants to like be comfortable in the clothes, and he's also like kind of insecure, so he will always like choose something that's more loose fitting, for example. And sometimes I kind of like just ditch the practicality aspect altogether if it's kind of just important for how I want to portray the character. I think like of someone like the doll, who's basically like the very melodramatic villain of the story, who wears like a lot of fancy dresses and like switches her wardrobe up a lot, and that's probably not super like practical for her. And I might also struggle a little bit to explain where she gets all these clothes from, but it's kind of something that when I designed her, I felt that she would be the type to just get these kind of clothes to feel fancy and to feel powerful. So that's what she's doing, and there I kind of ignore the logic a little bit to enhance the character more. Yeah. And I think other than that, I don't have like a lot to add. I think the way I approach clothes is like a lot about emotions. I'm not super logical when it comes to it. It's like it has to feel right. And that's like my super professional approach to designing clothes. I think an important aspect of that we already touched on a little bit, but is probably still like part of the overall question. So a little bit of a follow up is, what do you keep in mind when specifically designing for webcomics? Because it's like a medium you have to like draw hundreds and hundreds of pages, and you have to draw these characters so many times. Um, how do you approach that aspect of the clothing designs to like not get overwhelmed and burnt out with them?
Yeah, I mean, the most important thing is going to be designing something that you're able to draw a billion times in a row. That's not going to ruin your wrist, especially if you have a main outfit for a character, or if they do only have one outfit. Um, you're probably not going to want to add like a good amount of complexity in like patterns and stuff because you'll regret it a few thousand pages in. But one thing that can help with that is, like Megan said, making a unique silhouette to help keep it recognizable and interesting without the issue of having to draw detail over and over again. Besides that, giving characters like a unique, like stable piece can help keep a character somewhat consistent and easily recognizable. Like one of my characters has this jean jacket that he has had since the beginning and has had to repair a few times, but he still has the darn thing. Um, and that can help designing outfits because you already have one bit ready. The character's always going to be wearing this jacket or whatever. You just have to design around it. But then the other side of that is that you always have to consider it when designing, so it can also limit you. Um, Another thing to consider is if you are in a fantasy world, you'll probably want to consider having a consistent fashion style, like for different parts of the world. And then you'll want to think about, like, how much do you want your characters to stick out? For me, I don't like have a design document to guide fashion choices yet. It's something I'm considering, especially when you have characters traveling to different places. Different clothing can, like, it's an easy way to separate these places and make them feel very different. And even if it's just like a place that rains a lot, so everyone wears raincoats, it can be like a unique thing to easily see like these characters are from this place. So then it can be a fun thing. Like you see them later, you're like, hey, that group of people, they're all wearing raincoats in this other city. I wonder if they're from here. And so that can be fun. It's not necessary, but um, uh, one more thing to consider, especially if you are a traditional artist like me, is when I do eventually mess up the outfit that I'm drawing, how easy is it going to be to fix? Like, sometimes I'll just start drawing limbs and I'll be like, oh, I forgot to draw the jacket, and now how am I going to fix this? So, if the clothes are tighter, just like a long sleeve shirt, I have to worry about that less because the clothes are going to follow the shape of the body anyways.
I think definitely saving your wrist, most important, in my opinion. Don't, do not kill yourself to make your comic. You will be drawing things a ton. So pick what looks good and is still easy to draw, so that you're not drawing a million tiny details a million times. For me, that usually means I've created multiple different potential outfits for my characters, and then I have to step back and I have to look at those and decide not only which one fits the character best, but also which one am I not going to have to constantly remind myself about every little detail, so I don't forget it when I'm drawing. And then also because of that, sometimes when I get started drawing for the first, like couple of pages or something, even the outfit I have originally chosen maybe goes through a few times where I forget a small detail or change a small part of the outfit accidentally, and then that becomes my new way of drawing the outfit, simply because it looks just as good, but it's a little easier on me to draw and remember every time I'm drawing it. So yeah, don't kill yourself drawing your outfits. Looking cool and fashionable is important, but you can also do that without having so many details that you're zoomed in at like 300%.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think it's like really important to recognize also when you have characters that only have that one outfit, when you realize, okay, that's not fun to draw or that's too hard to draw, to be able to just go back and say, okay, I'm gonna switch it up. For me, I think the idea of having the character have like a staple piece that makes them recognizable, like Jackie mentioned, I think that's a really good way of keeping the character recognizable and their fashion sense recognizable while not losing yourself too much in details. And something that personally helps me, and is also like a plus when you have a comic where characters can change their clothes, is that I feel I'm getting burnt out when I have like to draw the same outfit over and over and over again. So if I notice that this is happening, the character gets a new outfit that still follows like the same structure that I generally have for that character. For example, like 11 will often have like a longer coat or something that makes her like shaped a little bit like a bell, and that is something I will like keep with her clothes, but I will then in general change the outfit because it helps me not getting burnt out. And I think that can also be like an important idea to be able to change the things that are draining you. I mean, of course, you can also kind of lose yourself in switching the characters' outfits. I think that might be like a little bit of a pitfall if you like love designing outfits so much that the character is constantly like switching outfits. That might be a problem because then there might be like other details that you have to keep track of. But I think like if you get into the flow of drawing the comic and drawing the same outfits over and over again, or the same style of outfit, you will kind of figure out what works for you and what doesn't. Okay, I think with that, we might already be at our third question, and I think that might be like one of the most important questions, and that is, how do you use fashion and the looks of your character to reinforce their personality and their place in the world of your story?
Yes. Um, like I said before, just from a recognizability standpoint, clothing can help your character stand out, can help them blend in if they need to. It can tell people about your character beyond actual decisions and actions in the comic. And specifically for this, I'm thinking about, and I might be reading way too much into this, but Rosemary from Ingress Adventuring Company, and she dresses in like a little bit of a girly way. Like she dresses cute, and her personality isn't very like stereotypically girly girl, but she still likes to look cute, and that doesn't contradict her in any way. It just adds to the character. Like I love thinking about her like going to her closet and picking out a cute outfit for the day. And another character in there is Vivian, who dresses in a very uptight and concealed way, which just reinforces that she's a character who hides things. So, just in that same comic, there's examples of adding to a character or reinforcing a character. Another comic that I think about when I think about like reinforcing character dynamics through clothing is Kochab, where Sonia is very like poofy and fluffy. She's warm and comforting, and that's who she is as a person, very solid. She's ready to weather the winter, whereas her counterpart, Kyra, dresses much more like light and flowy, like she's not going to be there for long. Like her scarf is like literally a fire. She's a flame spirit, which helps sort of unconsciously strengthen who those characters are for the viewers. Um, in my own comic, I guess the best example of, I don't really have an example that I can think of adding to a character beyond like their actions in comic, but reinforcing a character for Hannah in the episode I'm currently working on. He starts dressing a lot more colorfully and like exciting for the world. And that I feel like more reinforces his character than what he was wearing previously when he was more trying to fit in. And so, yeah, there's a shift there. He's dressing more like himself, which reinforces his character, which makes sense.
I think, or at least I like to hope that the couple of characters in my own work, that their outfits sort of reinforce their personality and who they are Tempest and Alec. Personally, for Tempest, I like to think that because his outfit is made up of a bunch of layers, it's kind of ready to go wherever he might go, because he's a very adventurous person, down to just kind of at the drop of a hat do almost anything. And because it's rather flowy and kind of loose fitting, that just kind of adds to the fact that he's a man on a mission at any point in time, and his clothes need to be comfortable and easy to move in. whereas Alex are more structured, rather fancier looking than Tempest, because he's more of kind of the personality that we need to kind of stop and think about everything and make sure that we have a plan. And he's not ready to go everywhere and anywhere, nowhere quite as well as Tempest is. So maybe he's not quite as got that more comfortable, easy to move in clothing because of that.
Yeah. I think for me, I like think a lot about colors. So one aspect would be to like kind of show how characters maybe belong together with giving them a similar color palette. Sometimes I also like do that without even really like thinking about it. I've noticed that, for example, Cortez and one of his partners have like basically the same color palette with like some differences. When I designed like the main trio for the story, I wanted to have like reoccurring colors within their outfits, and then for Victoria, I wanted to give her like some overlaps with her mother, and basically give her like one color that really pops out to like symbolize that she's kind of like rebelling against her mother's ideas, or that there's like kind of a conflict there, which is mostly just like probably only noticeable when you know about it. Yeah, otherwise I've already mentioned the doll, who's basically where her clothes are basically just enhancing her dramatic personality. That's why she dresses the way she does. I guess something similar would be with like the character Leonard, who's also just um kind of a fancy character, very fashionable, very a lot of the times thinking about what people think of him. So that's something that is reflected in his clothing as well. Yeah, but I think that's like the main thing. I do like a lot with colors and like the overlaps that the characters might have with one another, and also because you already made like some really good points. um Although, okay, that's not like webcomic specific, but I know that like a lot of films might do that. That, for example, they might put like a character in one color with the clothing, and then throughout the movie, when the character like finds their group, gets like the group to adopt some of the colors. For example, the character is like maybe mainly wearing red, and then while the film progresses, other characters who the characters like finding connections with will adopt the color into their clothes. And I think that's always like kind of like an interesting and smart way to show connections in a way that's like subtle. And that's basically what I like to do. It looks like we're like close to the end. Is there something that you still want to mention, something that you still want to talk about that's important to you right in this moment?
Some pitfalls that you might run into when designing an outfit, especially for webcomics. You create a cool outfit, but it's hard to draw, so you gotta you gotta scrap it. Probably you gotta reconfigure it until it's something that you are able to draw. And not making references is a huge pitfall just for me. Literally, just this morning, I was looking for some references I made for some outfits I'm drawing, and they don't exist, which is rough. But even they're just like little doodles giving you an overview of what's being worn and the colors used, especially for me being a traditional artist, I can't go back and color pick. So writing down what colors I used is very important. And with more detailed outfits, it can be both fun and practical to make like references of like the different stages of getting dressed in that outfit. And so you can really like understand in your head how this outfit would be constructed and layered. Another pitfall that I've heard so many times is people saying that they can't be good at fashion. They don't know anything about fashion. They're not fashionable. And that can't stop you. Um, I was never known to be a fashionable person throughout my life, but I just started experimenting, and now it's something fun. It's something I like to do, and that doesn't necessarily come back to the way I dress, though it sometimes does. But fashion is it's such a broad concept that even if you're just thinking about like the way you dress, if it's just for comfort or like what was on top, like there's still decisions you're making, and that's something you can consider when designing for characters. Like you have some knowledge about what you like to wear and why you like to wear it, and so that's not nothing. That can help you. So yeah, and you don't have to be your only specimen for fashion ideas. There's lots of people out there to observe, plenty of references, but like just because you don't feel like you're fashionable doesn't mean that you can't be good at designing clothes, especially for your webcomic, because maybe you are just designing very practical clothes, and if you dress for comfort and not for quote unquote fashion, then that would be extremely useful. So, yeah, it's not going to help you to say you can't before you give yourself a chance to try. So, those are the pitfalls I have. I don't know if you guys have any more.
Yeah, I think that are some like important pitfalls to think about. I've been while you were talking, I've remembered that a lot of the times, especially with like younger webcomic artists, you see characters just having like one style of clothing, and you know, okay, this is the style of clothing the person behind the webcomic very much likes. And I don't think that's like necessarily a bad thing, but on the other hand, it might like limit you with the variety of expression that the character can have. So I think one of the pitfalls might also be to be like too like to concentrate too much on that one kind of fashion, on the fashion you like. I think this can be a great starting point to start designing fashion, but it's always like nice to broaden your horizons and try out some other things so that your characters can really shine.
It can be a detriment to only think about styles you like, especially in webcomics. You should be thinking about your characters first. Well, not first, but you should consider them in like some respect when it comes to how you're dressing them. Like it could be a great style that you love that looks great on them, but it clashes with the character. So that can be something that it's a pitfall, I guess. Yeah.
I definitely agree with the pitfall of wanting to create a cool outfit, but it's hard to draw. I have an outfit I designed for Tempest that is so cool, and I think about it to this day, even though it's been like what 4 5 years since I've designed it, and I love it. And it's great and it's beautiful, but honestly, he'd never wear it. It's too fancy. It's not it's not him. Uh so I just think about it. But sometimes you have to make that hard choice that, like, as cool as the outfit is, as rad as it is, and maybe it's also easy to draw a billion times over. It's just it's not comic practical from the perspective of the character. So you have to just put it aside, and that's okay. Um Personally, I'm just going to talk about the making references things. I don't have a hard time doing that. In fact, maybe I do it more often than I should, but yes, please make references, especially if your character has more of maybe a complicated outfit or an outfit with more intricate designs on it. Make sure that if it's more detailed, maybe you need a front sort of reference and maybe a back or a side, kind of break down any layers. If it has more of a detailed pattern on it, definitely make sure that you are making a reference for that pattern at almost any angle you think you could possibly need, so that you're you're not getting to that point where you need a reference and you don't have it, or maybe you're creating it in that moment, but you need it right then and you're struggling to kind of visualize what it looks like. References are super important. Please make them.
Also, if we have time, I'd just like to call out some webcomics that I think have really good outfits, because this is a webcomics podcast.
Mm-hmm.
Um, one is Phantomarine, which is great fashion inspiration for me when I'm drawing their characters, because of the like complete separation of colors for every character, especially like the red through purple gradients that Cheth wears. It's so fun to design around those. I I really enjoy it, really like looking at it. And then I already mentioned Kochab. Just had to shout those out.
Yeah, I think that's totally fair because there are like a lot of webcomics that really go hard on the fashion, and I think I'll do the same. One of the webcomics I would like to shout out in that regard would be Obelisk, which has like 1910 setting, and there's just like a lot of research going into the historical fashion and just such a love for detail with like portraying these historical clothes and also still giving the characters personality through what they are wearing. So yeah, that would be my shout out.
I think for me, I'm going to second the shout out on Phantomarine. Definitely fabulous costume design, and then especially with sort of seconding the aspect of specific colors for specific characters. And then semi in this same vein is Never Satisfied for me. The characters have sort of main colors, um, and their outfits change partway through the comic, with sort of not really personality changes, but sort of their surroundings, and what sort of environment differences they have. And then my last one is Alice in the Nightmare. Um, I just, especially with the Cheshire Cat, he has such sort of a personality focused outfit. It's very different from everyone else, but that just sort of highlights uh, how he enjoys wearing whatever he wants, and he doesn't particularly care whether or not it really fits in.
Yeah, I think that shows how great webcomic artists are at like designing fashion for their comics. But I also think that's a wrap. Um, Thank you, Jackie. Thank you, Megan. But especially Jackie, since you're our guest today. So thank you so much for joining us and talking about fashion with us. I've been Finn, and you can find my webcomic at airsoftheveil.com.
I'm Megan, and you can find my webcomic on sorceryshenanigans.com.
I'm Jacki, and you can find my webcomic at kingsofsorts.com.
Thank you for listening to Screen Tones, a webcomic podcast. Want to know some other ways to support us? Check out our Ko-fi at ko-fi.com/screentonescast, where your support will help us create more episodes, reach cool extra bonus goals, and keep us talking about anything and everything webcomics. You can also find us on Twitter, Tumblr, Instagram, and our Discord server. Thank you so much for listening, sharing, rating, and supporting, and we'll see you next time.